Hello, humans. Welcome to the M Word podcast brought to you by Martin. Today I'm joined by Chris Hall. Chris, thanks for joining me today.
Thank you very much, and thank you for inviting me.
Pleasure. As I say to all guests, I appreciate the time. I know time's very valuable. Perhaps for our listeners and our viewers, just to get the ball rolling, perhaps just a bit of background for yourself in business, and also I know we touched on sport before we came on air as well. Just a bit of background to set the scene for our listeners.
So business-wise, my industry is telecoms and technology. Joined as soon as I left university, went to work for British Telecom, which was on their graduate program, and it's a great company to work for because it was changing from being a government bureaucracy to a commercial organisation, and they trained us really well and gave us loads of opportunity. So I've always worked in sales, marketing, business development. Came to the Isle of Man in the late 90s, just on a 2-year contract to set up the internet really for Manx Telecom, which was, again, a really interesting project. Never heard of the Isle of Man before we came here, coming from London, coming from the south, but absolutely loved the island, and I was very lucky. After 2 years, was meant to go back into other jobs in BT and O2, but my boss took early retirement, and I became managing director at Manx Telecom. I had a fantastic time at Manx Telecom, leading a team of 300 people. And then to bring us up to date, about 10 years ago, I became self-employed, and I now spend my time between two things, really. Probably half my time on formal non-exec director roles, and half my time I work with startups as an angel investor, and most recently as a founder.
Okay.
And then you asked about sport. If the viewers could see me, they're probably not built for sport now. But when I was younger, I was a really keen sportsman. My first love was football, but went to a rugby school, so was played football socially. But my main games are cricket and hockey. And actually was lucky enough to play hockey to a good standard. At Cambridge University, I got a half blue and played some quite serious level, and then played some serious level club hockey. Yeah. But I was a goalkeeper, and you have to be very agile and very fit. So I wanted to get at the top of my game, so I retired when I was 30.
All right, okay. And it's good because obviously a lot of our conversation today will be maybe linking business and sport and the correlation between the two of them. Just one quick question on going into, I guess I was going to say, well, British Telecom. You mentioned in sales and marketing. Was that just a career path that you just fell into? What drove you in that direction?
So I actually, my degree was engineering, but because through the BT graduate scheme, we had, it was really good. You could go around and look at the business, and I sort of realised I didn't want to become an engineer. And I was always really interested in the business side of stuff. So my first role was working for a very small startup unit within BT as an entrepreneurial unit. And there's 4 of us, and my grand title, I was international sales manager. But I've just always been interested much more in how you apply the technology and how you use it. A few of my contemporaries on that scheme ended up in the research labs and spent 30 years doing valuable research. But for me, that wasn't exciting. I wanted to be out dealing with people and working in the commercial environment.
And if we then pull in the obviously led a career of leadership, what is that something that kind of came naturally to you? You think about leadership and the development of your skills in that area? Or did you?
Yeah, that's interesting. When I was in the sports team, I would quite often end up as the captain. So I guess that suggests there's some natural leadership. But yeah, I suppose to progress in BT, you very soon had to take on a managerial leadership role. And I got a really big break when I was 23, and I saw this job advertised as major system sales manager in the City of London, leading a team of 50 salespeople. So 23, I was only managing myself, so I had no leadership experience. But I applied for it, and they took a risk on me, and it was absolutely fantastic. Now, my main experience was I was doing a lot of international travel, and I read loads of biographies of leaders, lots of books, not academic textbooks, but practical things like the 1 Minute Manager, the 1 Minute Negotiator, all that stuff. But yeah, so that was really being thrown in the deep end, and that was pretty much sink or swim. But then moving forward, that worked. And then work for a big organisation, they invested a lot in training and development. So I've been on some amazing leadership and management programs. So I think you're always learning.
Yeah.
Even at my, I'm quite a reflective person. So I'll come out of a board meeting and think, actually, did I handle that okay? Could I have done that better? Yeah, when I chair a board meeting, how could the meeting be better? So yeah, it's a bit, so I think there must be some natural in your DNA, but I think there's a ton of training and development and giving you the tools to become a more effective and a more inspiring leader.
So when we go back to maybe those earlier days when you read and listened, or maybe read a lot of books around that, is that again something that was just a subject that was interesting to you? Again, I'm thinking about maybe aspiring leaders that are listening to this, going, it's not necessarily all about just doing qualifications. There's also a lot, I suppose, learned experiences, either on the job, obviously, but also then picking up YouTube or audiobooks, etc.
Yeah. I guess I found it really interesting. So it was, you could read a crime thriller. I just find it quite inspiring to particularly read biographies of successful people. I just find that really interesting. And when I first went into the work environments, it was quite interesting looking, the impact your manager or your leader has on you is immense. I think the reason most people leave jobs is because they have a bad boss. And even in my, just starting out in my career, I had a couple of fantastic, inspiring leaders who made a real impact on me. For example, I went on a secondment to America for 3 months to support our distributor out there. And the guy running the startup company there, absolutely brilliant. And one of the leadership lessons I got was after my first month, he called me in the office and, have I done something wrong here? But he said, absolutely delighted you've done an absolutely brilliant job. And he got the company checkbook out and wrote me $1,000 check as a bonus. Completely unexpected, but I thought, wow, that was so powerful. Yeah. So it was actually the first, he said thank you, but actually then gave me
reward.
So that, and then I was already motivated, but then that super motivated me. So in those early spots of the career, I could see in our big organisation, I could see some people who were great leaders and great to work for, and you saw the other side of the coin, people who were perhaps a bit more command and control, a bit more old school, but not so effective. So it's just something that's always interested me.
And do you think people following leaders that command and control can work for certain people and help them develop? Or do you think there's, I wouldn't say one way to lead, but there's a better way to lead?
So yes, I think you have to have situational leadership. And actually, if you're in a crisis, command and control can be effective because you haven't got time to build consensus. In the COVID pandemic, I guess that was the only model which was really going to work. Yeah. But in other situations, particularly for driving a culture change, which is something I've done quite a lot of in my career, then you have to bring the people with you, and you have to have a much more engaging style. But I think actually the best leaders I've known aren't a one-trick pony.
Oh, okay.
So I think that's why it's so challenging being a leader, because it's not one. You have to vary your style depending on the situation and depending on the where you are and who you've got working with you.
So maybe to throw a very broad question, then, if you had to define leadership, how would you, in your words, define it? I appreciate it's a very open question. That's the point of it.
So. To keep things simple, I think for me, a good leader is someone who articulates actually clearly where we're going and why, what we need to do, and then explains how each of the team, how they fit in, what they need to do, and then empowers them to do it. And then, so that's as simple as leadership. What's our goal? What's our vision? So in sports, it might be we're going to win the Rugby World Cup. That was Clive Woodward's goal and vision. Yeah. And then he set the path and it was a 4 or 5 year project, and then set the intermediate steps, got the right people around him, and he was a great example of someone who delivered.
So let's maybe talk about those people around as well, just as important as part of that leadership journey.
Yes. So one of the key learnings from very early in my career, and it's obvious, but you're only as good as the people around you. A role of a leader is very complex, and people who are micromanagers are not effective leaders. And So you've got to have the best possible team working around you. One of the skills BT gave me, actually, which was very interesting, is when I was in the sales team, we had a lot of vacancies. I inherited a team with a lot of vacancies, and we had to do a lot of recruitment. But they said before I was allowed to recruit, I had to go on a training course, to become a qualified assessor. And it was a 5-day course. And what was really good, it was pass or fail.
Okay.
And I thought actually that was a really good discipline, because it was, there's a lot more to interviewing than just turning up and tell me about yourself.
Yeah.
And that was absolutely fantastic. And those taught, you never get it 100% right with recruitment, but I think one of the skills of a good leader is recruiting the right people and then actually motivating them.
Yeah. And in your career, have you seen a change in leadership style that's effective? So, and my guess would be historically it was a bit more authoritarian, and now it's less so. But
Yes, and it's a function of our industry too. So telecoms, coming from a civil servant government mentality, it was very hierarchical. So when I turned up in City District, people would call you Sir or Mr. Hall. Well, no, I'm Chris. I think everyone wore ties. When you're a manager, you had to wear a tie, you had to wear a suit. But certainly when I came to Manx Telecom, the way the tech industry was going, I wanted it to be a more relaxed, not relaxed as unprofessional, but a less formal culture. There were some of the structures can be good, but if it stops you delivering what you need. So one of the things early in my career was it was quite a lot of silo mentality between the different departments. So there was, you were only allowed to speak to your peer in the other department, but actually the person who can help me is at the sharp end. So so that's the change I've seen now. I think we've got much more flexible styles. And personally, that's sort of better, because I want work to be fun. Well, the bottom line is you spend a lot of time at work and you want to enjoy it and make it be fun. And it's much more fun for me if we're actually working effectively and collaboratively and collegiately, as opposed to following rigid hierarchies.
To go back to a comment you made earlier around being reflective after meetings, how have you found the balance between not overly ruminating, should we say, and also as a leader?
I guess part of that's driven by time, because it's always moving on to the next one. So a lot of it, a lot of this will be a very quick driving back in the car. The more informal thing. But also I'm a big believer in formal feedback too. Even if you're a leader, there's always scope for, in sport they talk about the marginal gains. And I do believe as a leader, there's scope for marginal gains. Mm-hmm. So, for example, I chair one of the boards I chair. We've just completed our formal board evaluation process. Again, really valuable. The board is performing well, it's doing a good job, but there's always a few things you can do differently. But it's a good point. I don't want to over-reflect, because actually a good leader also has to be decisive and crack on with stuff. So I pride myself on making quick decisions too.
Yeah, I guess it's that balance, isn't it? And there's no handbook, is there? I guess that just comes through experience and time, I would assume.
Yes,
from your side.
But also, some of this reflection is more. You also have to have confidence as a leader too, don't you? Because if people are going to follow you, you've got to be absolutely confident.
Yeah.
So I'd probably be quite careful how I would pick my feedback.
Yeah. So I guess, we touched on it a couple of times there, but this correlates exactly the same in sport. And, I guess as captain, it's following that same pattern, getting people to, this is our plan, and then executing that plan.
Yes, it's, and it's, I think, one of the interesting things in sport is it does show the power of a team. Because, in the games I played, hockey, which I played to quite a high level, I got half blue at Cambridge University. And then when I left, we were playing the sort of third tier in English hockey. But we probably weren't the most talented team, but by having working together, by having a good team spirit, good motivation, and actually putting in, the cliche, the 110% effort, that's, for me, is incredibly satisfying when you have a more talented team. Yeah. So I remember, one game of hockey as an example. I say we were playing in the South League, and a team had just come down from the National League. And they turned up for the game about 2 hours early. They were wearing their sort of club uniforms, whatever, our warm up, and it was, it's quite impressive. But we were a bit less organised. Our centre forward turned up about a minute before the kick-off, which was not good, not ideal. But it's at the end of the day, we beat them 4-2, and that was like incredibly satisfying because we had a fantastic team spirit.
Yeah.
And although they were well drilled, well structured, well organised, when they were at a bit of adversity, they fell apart.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So let's maybe talk a little bit about that then. I guess the term I'd probably use is resilience, is building resilience. So I guess in business, you've obviously had many, let's call them setbacks and challenges. Do you, through your career, have you learned that they're actually good things and experiences to go through? And while they can, I guess, knock you back, it's about taking the good things out of them. And I think I saw a quote recently where something bad happens to you, that's a good thing because there's a learning.
I would totally say that if everything's happening to you is bad, that's not good.
No, right.
But yeah, absolutely. Yeah, in life, whatever you are, in a big corporate or a small startup, there's going to be lots of bumps and lots of bumps in the road. I do a lot of work with startups, and it's particularly prevalent there. So as an entrepreneur, you have to have that resilience to actually bounce back. But also, again, one of the things I'm very hot on is I'm very, when people work for me, I say, you haven't made a mistake this year. You're not pushing yourself. You're not stretching yourself. But if you make the same mistake 3 times, I'm very annoyed.
Yeah.
So I think, yes, actually, mistakes are good. In the startup world, there's a saying, try it and fail fast. So better to try it, fail fast, learn, move on. And I think, in my experience in America, much more, I wouldn't say they celebrate failure, but actually if you're an entrepreneur in America and you've had 3 failed startups, that sort of makes you quite investable.
Right. Interesting.
Because you've got the battle scars, probably more investable than someone who's fresh out of business school with no experience.
Okay, interesting. So maybe just to finish off on the leadership side, and again, a very open question. Not open, but it could be answered, I'm sure, 1,000 ways. If there's young, aspiring leaders, we all lead in some context, but aspiring leaders listening now, what would the kind of 1 or 2 pieces of advice you'd give them?
So one bit of advice is be authentic. Everyone has their own strengths and weaknesses, their own styles, and there is no one size fits all. So the first thing is don't try and be what you're not. You've got to do it your way, and your personality will come through. So be real. The second bit of advice is prepare yourself as best you can, and particularly for your first or second leadership role. So call it more a managerial role. So you're likely to be managing a team. Well, you're still leading a team before you become to really senior leadership. So I would say prepare yourself before you get that first job. And one thing we did at Manx Telecom, we realised we were taking, say, very good engineers and putting them in charge as a manager, managing 20 engineers. But we hadn't given them any of the tools to equip them. So how do you do a one-to-one? How do you set objectives? How do you deliver bad news? How do you present at a team meeting? So we set up an aspiring leaders program and spent time training 20 of our aspiring leaders. So that day, the first day, they walk in front of their team of 20 people, and they've got some basic things, and that's in the analogy of the sport. No top sports teams just turn up on Saturday.
Yeah.
You train, you coach. If you're a golfer, you refine your swing. Yeah. I've just started playing pickleball, which is a wonderful sport. But again, you can't turn up and whack the ball. But actually, we had some coaches over on the island a couple of weeks ago, and absolutely fantastic to actually improve your skills. So that would be my main advice: is do some training and development before you take on your first leadership position, and then continually take opportunities to develop yourself. Because I also see people who are so busy, they say, I can't take out 3 days to go on the negotiation calls. I can't take out a day. This is the one which makes me laugh. I can't take out a day to go on the time management course
because I'm too busy.
So you have to make time to invest in yourself to continually improve.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's sort of move the conversation a little bit around to culture in business. I know you're I suppose who isn't an advocate of that, but maybe again, really broad question, define culture in a business.
So culture, there's quite a lot of academic stuff written about culture, but culture to me is it's the way we do things around here. So any organisation does have a culture. The best organisations are very explicit about it and very clear about it. Others, actually, there is just a culture which is not so explicit and not so positive. Culture is, so a number of my jobs have involved culture change. Yeah, when I came to Manx Telecom, it was a monopoly, only game in town, and there was lots of good people. But as a monopoly, you don't have the same energy as you would have if there's very competitive. And we knew competition was coming. So my job was to take the culture from being an effective monopoly to be an effective competitive organisation. And that's culture change is not quick. It's a long journey. But again, you've got to define what your target culture is, and then you have to embed it.
And how do you change those behaviours just over time?
So there's no one simple answer, but there's multiple tools and techniques. So the more formal technique is, which I am very important, is when you appraise people and set their objectives. It's not just what they do, it's how they do it. If you're serious about culture, you measure performance on, what was your output? Did you hit your sales target? But how did you do it? So a lot of the one-to-ones are focusing on behaviours, not just on outcomes. So that's one.
And can I say that how would be linked to the culture?
Absolutely. So it's living the values. So, I've had some salespeople who smash their targets, but they're just causing absolute chaos in the organisation. And that actually is not helpful. The second way you address it, and then let's draw this into sport. So I was lucky enough to go to O2 sponsored the England rugby team. And Clive Woodward, who I think is an absolutely amazing leader, gave us a couple of talks about his leadership style. And he was very hot on this. When he inherited the England rugby team, the culture wasn't where it needed to be world champions. And he set down the teamship rules, I think he called them, but values or behaviours. And there was a guy, the hooker, who thought he was bigger than the team and deliberately started flouting the rules. So Clive came in one morning, boom, so he dropped him. He said, "You will never play for England ever again while I am the boss." So in business, you do have to do that sometimes. You're clearly fairly and following due process. But if people absolutely aren't going to live your culture, they do have to go. A very valuable thing he said, he called them energy sappers. So he said you could have a team of 100 people, and if there's 2 or 3 energy sappers, they can disproportionately drag down the team. I think anyone listening, I bet anyone can think of an energy sapper in their organisation. So again, one of the learnings I had, I was probably spent a bit too long trying to get energy sappers on the right page. Yes, give your energy sapper a chance to get with the program, but actually some energy sappers ain't going to change. So let them go and sap their energy somewhere else.
And again, I guess that's as a leader, you've pulling it back to leadership. There's obviously a due process there, but that's also there's again no black and white, is there? There's
absolutely.
So that just comes through skill, knowledge, experience.
Absolutely. And then the other important side of the coin is focus on success too. So again, celebrating success, recognising success. So part of the culture I wanted at Manx Telecom, we had a very wordy mission statement, which no one could remember, and it didn't really mean anything. So we just came up with something very simple, which was do some good, make some money, and have some fun. So that was our mission statement. Do some good, help the community, support the community to provide world-class communications. Clearly make some money because we're a business. But for me, the have some fun bit is really important. And that might be because of my sales background. So part of that celebrating success and building the culture was recognising the role models and publicly recognising them. So team player of the month, customer compliments of the month, just basic stuff. And actually making sure managers say thank you. And I say thank you as the leader. And we then made it a bit more tangible and gave each of the managers a budget for ad hoc recognition. So if an engineer had gone the extra mile, the manager could just go and buy him a bottle of beer or crate of beer, whatever. and present that to them as a team meeting to reinforce these positive behaviours.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. In front of people. Yeah.
Absolutely,
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Interesting. So just to follow up then, if you think about values, is something, if you look at then from a personal perspective, is that something you've looked at and considered from a personal level? What are my values in your business career, and gone, these are my values, and therefore, carried that through your, I suppose, leadership.
Yes, it perhaps comes out to being an authentic leader.
Yeah.
But yes, yes.
I think that's what leaders should do, is to not necessarily write a list, but have a list of these are my values as a leader.
I guess you should be aware of them, because it is also going to drive your behaviour. So one of my overarching values, which came from my parents, was treat people as you would want to be treated yourself, which is easy to say, but to me that is actually a pretty fundamental guiding principle. That's a value for me. Integrity is important to me too. So I had a few situations in my career where I've had to be true to myself and perhaps not do what. Again, I'll give you an example, because it's a very old example, not on the Isle of Man. One of my bosses, we were recruiting, and his girlfriend was part of the application process to join our team. And he pulled me aside and said, "She will get the job, won't she?" Well, my values is, no, if I've got a high performance team and if I'm being fair and transparent, whatever, that's not the way we work.
Yeah.
So I actually did say to him, yes, if she's the best.
Yeah. Right.
And she wasn't the best. So, but my view is, you've got to do what's right. I would have no credibility with the team. It wouldn't actually be fair on the individual either, because you bring in someone who's not going to do the job well. So I stuck to my guns, and it was the right thing to do. Wasn't very happy for 2 weeks, but then we moved on.
Yeah, interesting. So let's move on again, if that's okay. So we talk about roles. You mentioned about doing non-exec roles at the moment. Talk a bit about again, probably a little bit about what you're bringing to that, but generally what corporates should be thinking about when they're bringing non-execs in, or why they should bring non-execs, I guess, as well.
Okay.
And maybe just to add a little bit more, obviously we sit here as Atlo in a regulated space as well, so I guess there's an extra incentive to have that independence on the board.
Yes,
as one of the many things.
So again, I suppose my first exposure to non-execs was as managing director of Manx Telecom, because I've not worked with non-execs before. But again, at the time we had local non-execs and then the shareholder representatives. And I had some absolutely amazing NEDs, and there's no doubt at all they helped make me be much more effective in the organisation, because they were good non-execs. So what non-execs bring to the party is the word, I think the key word you said is independence. The executive team are full-time, very focused on delivering this year's plan. The non-execs and the board are focused more on the 3 to 5 year horizon. And it's quite interesting, because I work in different ownership models. So as you say, in big corporates and regulated, there's probably a regulatory reason you have to have non-execs. When Manx Telecom were listed, the corporate governance code and the city and shareholders expect you to have non-execs. Mm-hmm. When you go down to startups, there's no obligation to have non-execs. You could have a board of exec directors. But some of the smart startups realise, even when you're very young and very early stages, the value of having someone, a different perspective, a sounding board, someone who's got a bit more experience. So there's no one size fits all. Every NED role I do, the basic stuff is the same. The fiduciary responsibilities are the same. The job description is the same. But then the nuance is, what's the size of the organisation? Where is it in its lifestyle? And how can the board and NED add most value?
Yeah. And do you adapt to it then? Would you look for roles that perhaps, let's say, fit your stronger skills, or you've got a fairly open mind?
Yes. So it's quite interesting, because initially I got pigeonholed as a telecoms NED, but actually I'm a businessman, and I'm actually a technologist. And most businesses nowadays have quite a strong technology element in terms of how they go to market, cyber risk, etc. So I'm actually very open-minded, and very open-minded, and some of the most rewarding NEDs I've done and interesting have been in sectors outside my direct experience. So one of the big businesses on the island, Utmost Wealth, which everyone on the island will be familiar with, but a very big wealth management company with tens of billions of assets under management. They had a very strong board when I joined them 9 years ago, but everyone was an industry expert. So in terms of board composition, it was felt someone with a technology and sales background would really bring something to the party. Now is a very steep learning curve because that's a heavily regulated business and the way they do all the solvency, whatever. But it worked really well just to have that different perspective.
Yeah.
So I really enjoyed that. So yeah, my only criteria is first and foremost, do the business really want an NED? So if it's just a tick box exercise, they just want someone there to turn up at a meeting every quarter and sign some papers. That's absolutely not, because an NED has to be engaged and support the business and help drive it forward. Then the only other thing is I want to work with people I like and enjoy, because you can only do a handful because of the conflicts of interest. So it's important to me I'm working with a really great team where I can add value.
Yeah. Okay. During that, you mentioned there about angel investors. I know you do a bit of that. So just maybe talk a bit to the audience a bit about that.
Yeah, so the angel investing came about because having always worked in big corporates in my life, I'm actually an entrepreneur at heart, and I love all the Dragon's Den stuff and whatever, and I love starting stuff, and I love growing stuff, and I worked with lots of entrepreneurs when I was at Manx Telecom. So when I then started working for myself, some of my share option money, you can invest it in a fund, a high risk, high growth fund. So I thought, well, actually, I'd like to take more control of that myself. And so I started looking for very early stage tech startups who needed some seed funding. And I allocated a budget to do that. And over the last 10 years, I've invested in some really interesting businesses. It's, again, a whole new learning curve to do this, because there's a lot to learn. You have to have a diversified portfolio to spread your risk, and you have to be really selective and clear on what you're going to invest in. So the sort of things I look for is a great team, clearly a great idea, but I'm in this technology space. It's also how are you going to monetize it? How do you really understand what people are going to pay for it and how you're going to go to market? So I've probably seen 1,000 business plans over the last 10 years, and you end up investing in a tiny percentage. But then I find that quite rewarding, because the ones I see are all pre-revenue. And then as an investor, you're always there as a sounding board just to give them advice.
Yeah, I was going to say, does that in those investments, do you typically want to act as a sounding board, or sometimes happy to just step away, or is it a mixture?
So I do all three, actually. So there's a couple I actually do sit on the board, formally as an NED. So I'm much more involved there. There's a few where the founders, just occasionally we just have a call every quarter, really informal, or they'll know if they want a bit of advice on something. So it's a bit more. And there's two or three where actually there's such a strong pool of investors, such a great team. All I do is I just read the shareholder update.
Yeah, right. Okay.
If I had more time, I'd love to do more with all of them, but it's just you can't spread yourself too thinly. You have to do a few things well instead of doing a lot of things badly.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Okay, let's talk. So again, we as we all are, certainly on the Isle of Man, very community orientated, and let's talk a little bit about hospice. So maybe your experience there and the work you do with them now.
Yeah. So my first involvement. So Manx Telecom, we had a very strong community support ethos as one of the larger employers. So that was one of the most enjoyable parts of the job, actually, not just driving the business, but also supporting the community and supporting the government. So we had quite a lot of hospice would quite often be coming in to say, can you support this event, or how can you help us? And it's a great charity. I've had some experience when we're in the UK through family members, how they support the family members. Great people. And they actually asked me almost 20 years ago to join their fundraising committee, which is like an advisory board. So we did that. And then the next step, they said, well, we have a board of governors. Will you join the board? Which I did. And then about 4 years ago, the wonderful chairman, Smiles Walker, retired. And they asked me to become chairman of hospice. So now, from making taking a few tables at charity events, 20 years later, I'm now chairing the charity, and it's it's a wonderful organisation, but lots of challenges.
Yeah, let's, and if you don't mind, maybe talk about those challenges. Obviously, I think everyone listening and worldwide knows what hospice does, but I believe it's either not. Anyway, it's all fundraising, I believe. So it's all, obviously, you mentioned that journey started ultimately with the fundraising side, and I guess there's cycles, but fundraising is difficult at the best of times. Think about COVID, I'm sure it was even more difficult. But I guess I assume that's one of your biggest challenges in the organisation.
Absolutely. I mean, in terms of what the team deliver, it is outstanding. The medical care, but to deliver that high quality care, we have some very professional. Yeah, we have to have professional, qualified doctors, nurses. But everyone's aware that the medical inflation is a factor. Demand is going up. So we're in a situation where we have costs rising outside our control because we have to set our wages with the National Health Service, Manx Care. We have demand for our services, but as a charity, our business model is we don't charge a penny. Everything is free access. So that actually, strategically for the board, that's our biggest challenge. How can we raise the money every year? If I'm in a commercial organisation, if inflation goes up 10%, I'll probably try and put my prices up 10%. So we don't charge. And then the second thing is we don't have huge amounts of recurring revenue. So almost every year you're not going back to naught, but you're having to raise, so to put some numbers around this, to provide and meet all the demand on the island, and we have a wonderful hospice, and to meet all the demand on our services, it's costing 6.5 million a year. And that's a big sum of money. We do get some support from the government, for which we're grateful, but that government support is about 25% of our running costs. So that means from the community, we have to find 5 million currently, which is a big sum. And it's clearly, as you said, in the current climate, in the current cost of living climate, there's lots of fantastic charities on the island, all in a similar situation to us, trying to raise money at a time when there's less money in people's pockets.
Do you think, and I've heard maybe the odd comment before, do you find, because hospice does obviously have a great reputation and a high profile, sometimes you almost get overlooked because it's like, oh, well, people know about them, let's pick this little, and not obviously the little charities, let's call them as well, need the help, but do you find that at times?
There is definitely a perception, because if you're large, because we are large, people can think, oh, they don't need any help. But that's a perception which we're very aware of and something we just have to address. And the way we're addressing it at the moment is we actually be much more transparent with our communication. So we're being much more transparent about what the costs are, and also trying to explain to people what we do. But I've certainly heard this. A lot of corporates have a charity of the year, and I certainly get feedback is that, oh, we decided we're not going to support hospice because you don't need our help. The trouble is, every charity we're not the only one. But absolutely. We're in a lucky position because we're large, and we have to have a fundraising team, and we have a professional fundraising team. But most charities are really good at fundraising now. So what we have to be creative and think, how can we find new ways to help ourselves? So one thing we're looking to do now is we all have to look, how can we get engaged in slightly more commercial activities? So you can't do everything for free. So what can we do what we could charge for? So the hospice shops have been amazing. That delivers us, it's a brilliant business model, best business model I've ever seen. So you get lots of support from volunteers, you get all your goods free, and customers pay for them.
Right,
So that's a great source of funds for us, and that raises about 500,000 a year. So we're now thinking, what are our core competencies, and is there stuff we could charge for and get people to pay for, which would then support the charity. So that's one way we can help ourselves. The other way, which sort of links to your world, is we have to be more proactive in approaching philanthropic donors, high net worth individuals. I think there is a trend towards philanthropy globally. And again, we have to make sure that we're engaging with people and explaining what our what we do,
That message.
what our outputs are, and why we need their help.
Yeah. I guess there's an ESG, like you said, that philanthropic and this ESG conversations that are around that social impact. So you mentioned earlier there the two aspects of maybe more, I would say more transparent, I think was the language used around the amount, the cost, but also the messaging and what you do. So do you want to talk a bit about that second, since you talked about some numbers, the second part of that, and what?
Yeah, so again, in terms of what we do, you're absolutely right. Most people have an idea what hospice do, but it's actually way more complicated. I say I've been on the board for over 10 years, and it is a very complex organisation. So yes, the bit everyone's probably aware of is the inpatient unit. So we have 12 beds here on the Isle of Man, and the island is fantastically served. 12 beds for our population. I think that's in the UK. I think probably if we were at the UK average for hospice beds, we would have 2 or 3. So that shows how lucky we are on the island. So that's but it's much more than that. So we have a wonderful hospice at home team, and that is 24/7 by 365. So that's providing high standards of end-of-life palliative care in people's homes, but it's expensive to run a round-the-clock operation. And then there's the whole raft of other services: the physiotherapy, the day unit, the bereavement counselling, the lymphedema clinic, the dementia nurses. So it's actually a wide range of services. So at any one time, on our caseload, we have 500 people. Any month we're supporting 500 people, patients, or the families. And I suppose one of the key messages we're trying to get across, and anyone who lives on the island, hopefully you'll see some of the stuff we're putting in the press, is to really explain what we're doing. And a lot of this is about the families too. Because the end of life is the end of life, but it's how can we help the families and make sure that's the best possible experience, and then support them after.
Yeah.
So it's one of the misperceptions. It's a hospice, a place you go to die. It's way more than that, and it's a fun place too. The other thing is, if anyone's ever been to our building, there's a positive atmosphere. It's we try to be. It is. The staff are amazing. And it's a wonderful, wonderful charity. And it's all of the board are volunteers. We have 400 volunteers on the island, but you walk out of the building quite inspired by the staff and the good they're doing.
And how have personally taken on that role over the last number of years? Have you found that? I'd say it's probably, of all the NEDs I do, it's the one which has the most strategic challenges, because we're always, it's about sustainability. We all want the hospice to be here in 5 and 10 years' time, and we have to balance our income with what we're doing. So you have to make some quite hard decisions, because it's irresponsible. We've had several years where we've run at a deficit, which is absolutely unsustainable. But then you think, well, okay, we could do less. But then it's really real. If we had less beds, we can't support so many people. If we didn't have bereavement counselling, so it's much more real and much more. Some of the businesses is perhaps a little bit more. You're a bit further away from your customers. Here, living in the community, front and centre.
It's front and centre, and I suppose we view this as a vitally important service for the island. And we all feel responsibility. How can we make sure that we raise the funds and keep it going and keep it thriving and being successful, so it's here in 5 years' time and 10 years' time and 20 years' time, and doesn't fall by the wayside because we can't afford it.
Yeah, that stat you mentioned there about the number of beds is quite interesting, because again, I guess the perception, if you just hear the number 12, it doesn't sound a lot, but if you look at the wider context,
you see the challenge. I mean, the UK hospice sector have exactly the same challenges, and you'll probably read in the press. There's sadly almost every week now there's a hospice either having to make in the UK making a lot of staff redundant or having to shut beds. And there's an ongoing debate with the government about the UK government. I think they provide 33% of funding for the sector, so the community provides 66%. But of course, if the hospices weren't there, then all that service has to go on to the National Health Service, who we know are stretched and whatever. Yeah. So it's we share those strategic challenges with our colleagues in the UK. But yeah, the island, this is where the island's positive. The community support we have here is incredible. Yeah, we wouldn't have those 12 beds if we didn't have an incredibly generous community.
Absolutely. Chris, thanks for joining me today. Really interesting conversation, leadership culture and hospice. Great work there as well. I'm sure the community, thank you for all, and the team there for all the work they do as well. So thanks for your time and sharing some of your knowledge with us today.
Thank you very much. Thanks for inviting me. I really enjoyed it. And yeah, good luck to all the aspiring and future leaders. Just be authentic and be yourself.
Great. Thanks, Chris. Thanks for listening, everyone.
Poor flimsy humans. Don't you wish you were flawless like me? A towering inferno of physical perfection?
I hate to pop your blimp-like ego, but you're not perfect.